Good morning. Is it snowing outside your window?
No. Not yet.
Not. So where is your town? Tell me. Since they've heard a little bit about the Yanomami tribes in the north of Brazil, or the northern Amazon, it'll be nice to have a bit of a conversation. So I went there in 2007 with my dad and my brother, going back to places my grandfather had been to. So my grandfather in the early 1980s, you guys weren't around yet. My grandfather took his ship Calypso for 18 months, and him and his crew went up the Amazon River and were exploring places really that people didn't know yet. So now we have explorers and photographers and anthropologists who have been able to share a lot more information about that area. But back in the 1980s, really there wasn't a lot known. And he met with the Métis tribe, which is one of the tribes I'm now working with. They had recently been contacted. Contacted basically means that they have come into contact with the outside world. And typically they're either Brazilians or back in the 18th century, they were Europeans. 18th, 17th century and earlier, Europeans had come over from Europe looking for gold and looking for rubber. So they had come into the Amazon. They had actually enslaved a lot of the indigenous people there to work for them, to look for gold and to work the rubber tapping of the trees. And so what had happened with the contacts back in the European days is the Europeans had brought in a lot of diseases that the tribes people didn't have the immunity for. Their body couldn't fight off these diseases, and their shamans didn't have the right plants. Because in the jungle, all these plants grow that can help them with the illnesses they have naturally, but it doesn't necessarily help them fight off the illnesses from people from the outside. So this is a problem that started way back centuries ago, and is still an issue now, because in the Javari territory, there are still tribes that have no contact with the outside world. These are still people who live the way they always have. They would have no idea about the clothes you're wearing, Skype, so they have no idea about the way the outside world lives, what we necessarily look like, how we live, and they are also still very vulnerable, okay, because they don't, once more, they don't have the immune system against any of our diseases, and so if one of us were to go in there with a cold or the flu, that could actually kill half the population. Here's a question for you. What do you think the illegal, the people who are coming onto indigenous land illegally in the Amazon are looking for?
Gold and rubber.
So yeah, so back in the day, gold and rubber. Now gold is one of the things. Rubber, we make it synthetically, so we're no longer tapping trees for rubber. Wood and gold are two things for sure, hardwoods especially, right? Because a lot of people in the Western world will pay a lot of money for some pretty wood. Some other things that they go in for are hunting and fishing, because the indigenous land is completely protected. The indigenous people live sustainably. Because they live sustainably and in balance with their environment, the wildlife is abundant. And so there's people that come in from the outside where they have really, kind of pillaged the rainforest, and they're coming in to try to hunt and fish on the land. Something else that is important for us to know is there's oil under their feet. There's a lot of oil in the Amazon. And so foreign companies are coming in and they want to drill for oil on indigenous land. But the problem is that if there is an oil spill, then the entire ecosystem is contaminated. So how would you feel if one day you're playing in your backyard and some guy or some woman, somebody comes in your backyard with a big chainsaw and just cuts your trees down and takes them? It doesn't say anything, like, they're just coming on there and they shove you out of the way, they cut your tree, and they take it away. Would you guys feel that's okay?
No.
No way! What if they just walked in your house and opened up your refrigerator and started taking your food? How would you feel about that?
Angry.
Yeah, exactly. So it's the same thing. This is their home. They feel the same way. They say, hey, this is our backyard. You can't just cut the trees. You can't just walk into our home and take our food. It doesn't work that way.
Hi, my name's Lilia. How long has deforestation been a problem in the Amazon?
And I'm only going to be able to give you a little bit of a guess because I don't know, but I do know that as early as I think it was the 16th, 17th century. If you look at satellite imagery, you can see like with Google Earth, over time you can see the changes in deforestation. So, for example, building a road is a really big problem because where they build a road, there'll be deforestation on each side of that road for about 50 kilometers, and that's quite a long distance. So deforestation is a huge issue. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Kayla.
Hi.
What inspired you to be just like your grandfather?
Well, I think that I was inspired to be like a lot of members of my family. My mom was an expedition photographer for 13 years. My grandmother traveled on my grandfather's boat, her boat, more than anybody else. So she was always out on expedition as soon as the boat was gone. My dad was helping prepare the expeditions. It's just that my grandfather was the person everybody knew about, but everybody was a part of it. And what inspired me is to see that there were women in my family who were a part of this, my mom and my grandmother, and that I could do it too. That it wasn't just men who could go out and be explorers and tell stories like this.
Hi, my name is Will. How do you prevent yourself from getting diseases in the Amazon?
So we usually take anti-malarial medication when we're there. We're also very cautious to be covered, so we have long sleeve clothing, long pants as well, and we try to avoid, sunrise and sunset, which is not always possible because we're usually filming. They have a lot of hepatitis there, so we have to make sure we have all of our hepatitis shots before we go. And that's about it. Those are really the only diseases that we really have to worry about. The more we can understand our connections, the more we can understand that what happens there and to them is related to us. So it's our responsibility to make sure that we're fair in the world. And I think that if we can see that more and more, then we'll act more like a community. And the message really is that we are one human tribe. It's not about them and us. It's about all of us together.
Jake, where have you heard that before?
Jan Reynolds.
Yeah, so that's a big phrase that that author uses. This is another book that we read.
Celebrate.
Yeah.
Nice. Thank you.
Bye.